to Loom of Dreams. This is a place where stories are woven softly, thread by thread, until they become a blanket of quiet comfort around you. Before we begin tonight's story, let's take a few moments to settle the body and quiet the mind. If you'd like, close your eyes now. Let the rest of the world fade a little. Notice where you are, the shape of the room, the stillness of the air, the gentle warmth that surrounds you. Now, take a slow breath in through your nose. Feel your chest lift and your belly rise. And then slowly breathe out through your mouth, as if you're blowing warm air onto a window. Let your shoulders drop and feel that breath leave gently, like a sigh. Again, inhale softly, not too deep, just enough to feel the cool air enter. Pause for a moment and exhale slowly. Each time you breathe, imagine the air moving like a wave, in and out, steady and kind. Your body begins to understand this rhythm, the same rhythm as a calm sea at night, the same rhythm as the fire in the hearth. If your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Just notice it and bring it back to your breath, back to the sound of the fire, back to the quiet in your room. Now feel your body growing heavier, your hands resting loosely, your jaw unclenching, your eyes softening behind closed lids. Let your breath find its own pace. There's nothing you need to do. You are safe, you are home, and you are ready to rest. Liv took a slow breath, letting the cold slide into her lungs, then pushed gently. The door opened with a soft, rubbery sigh as the seal gave way. And at once, the world changed. Warmth met her like a wave, not harsh or stifling, but thick and enveloping. A soft, moist heat that wrapped around her face and hands, carrying with it a bouquet of scents entirely different from the snow and smoke outside. There was the dark, deep smell of damp soil, the bright, almost peppering note of crushed leaves, and underneath it all, a faint whisper of something sweet, the gentle promise of growing things. Her glasses, if she'd been wearing them, would have fogged instantly. As it was, tiny beads of moisture gathered along her eyelashes, and the world in front of her blurred for a heartbeat into a wash of greens and browns and soft, glowing light. She stood very still, letting her eyes adjust, letting her breath catch up to the change. Slowly, like a photograph coming into focus, the inside of the greenhouse revealed itself. Rows of raised beds stretched out from the doorway, lined with wooden planks worn smooth by many seasons. From them rose leaves in every shade of green, broad and silky, small and frilled, sturdy and upright, or trailing gently over the edges. Here, lettuce heads sat like open hands. There, kale leaves reached upward, their edges curled and strong. Clusters of herbs spilled over their pots, tiny leaves catching droplets of water that clung to their stems. From the ceiling beams hung bundles of herbs and small planters, drifting slightly when the air moved, their roots and leaves suspended in the warm light. Thin strings ran down to support taller plants, guiding them gently upward. High above her, a few fans turned at a patient, unhurried pace. Their blades moved so slowly that she could watch each one complete its circle, stirring the air just enough to keep it from growing heavy. On the soil itself, scattered like little jewels, were beads of water, some holding perfectly still, others sliding slowly down a leaf's curve, dropping at last to the earth with the tiniest of sounds. If she listened closely, really listened, she could hear it. Not the wind, not any more, but the soft, irregular rhythm of water in motion, a quiet drip here, a gentle patter there, and the subtle, almost whisper-like rustle of leaves brushing against each other when the air moved. Behind her, the winter breeze tried to follow her in, but she eased the door closed with care, and it shut out the snow and the sharpness of the cold with a soft thud. The outside world faded to a memory behind the glass. In here, the light was softer, filtered through layers of clouded panes and snow. It fell in pale, glowing patches across the soil and the pathways, turning every damp surface into something that shimmered quietly. Liv felt her shoulders drop. The tension she didn't realize she was holding slowly unwinding. Her scarf suddenly felt too snug around her neck, and the cold at the tip of her nose had already melted away. She reached up and loosened the wool, letting it fall open, then pushed her coat back just a little, feeling the warm, moist air settle against the fabric of her sweater. It was such a strange, lovely sensation to know that only a few centimeters of glass and snow separated this place from a world of wind and frost, and yet, inside, it was a different season altogether. Outside, it was winter. Inside, it was not quite summer, but a kind of gentle early spring that had decided to stay. Liv looked around, eyes wide, heart quiet but awake. For a moment, she felt as though she had stepped into a story someone else had written, where secret gardens existed under the snow, and glass houses on hillsides held pockets of time that did not match the calendar. A tiny, incredulous thought floated through her mind, light as a falling leaf. So this is what it's like, she told herself silently, to open a door in winter and walk straight into something green. And standing there, with the warmth rising from the soil and the air smelling softly of leaves and life, she knew she could happily stay in this little hidden season for a very, very long moment. Knut appeared from between two rows of kale with a small, contented smile, as if he'd been listening to the greenhouse breathe and liked what he heard. "Welcome to my jungle," he said, quietly, spreading his hands a little. "It's not much, but it keeps the town in vitamins." Liv laughed under her breath, the sound soft and a little awed. He began to walk slowly along the nearest bed, and she fell into step beside him. As they moved, he pointed out small details, the way only someone who has spent years in one place can. "This section here," he said, nodding toward a patch of darker soil, "was turned over just this autumn. New compost, lots of broken down leaves from the trees outside. The plants can taste when the soil has been fed properly. You can see it in their color." He touched a leaf lightly with the back of his knuckles, respectful, careful not to disturb it. "And this row," he went on, gesturing toward a neat line of lettuce heads, "is for the school canteen. They make sandwiches with the children with these. I like to imagine the kids getting a bite of green, even when the playground is all white." They wound their way deeper into the greenhouse, past pots of rosemary that released their fragrance at the slightest touch, past low bushes of thyme and dill, their fine leaves beaded with moisture, past a cluster of small tomatoes hanging on stubbornly to the last of their color. The further they went, the warmer the air felt, not by much, but just enough that Liv could sense it on her cheeks, like walking slowly toward a campfire you can't yet see. Then, as they rounded the final set of beds, the path opened into a slightly wider space near the back wall. And there it was. At first, Liv only registered the height, a tall shape reaching up toward the roof, where the glass panes met in a gentle peak. Then her eyes adjusted to the broad, arching leaves, each one unfurling in long, graceful curves, their surfaces a deep, vivid green. A banana tree, right there in the far corner of the greenhouse. Its leaves weren't perfect. Some of the edges were browned just a little, curled where the drier winter air had nipped at them. A few had small natural tears running along the veins. But overall, the tree looked remarkably alive, sturdy in its central stem, rooted firmly in a mound of dark, rich soil that rose out of a large wooden planter. And from the center of the leaves, hanging just at Liv's eye level, was a single beautiful cluster of bananas. They curved gently around each other in a tight, elegant arc, the ones closest to the base still pale green, those closer to the tip ripening to a soft, creamy yellow. On a few of them, tiny brown speckles had begun to appear, those faint freckles that only show up when a banana has had the patience to ripen in its own time, in its own place. Liv stopped walking without meaning to. Her breath caught, leaving her chest full and quiet. The idea of bananas was not strange to her, of course. She'd seen them in grocery stores, stacked in big, bright piles under fluorescent lights. She had eaten them on hurried mornings in the city, slices tossed into bowls of yogurt, pieces blended into smoothies she drank on the way to work. But seeing them here, in the flesh, so to speak, hanging like a small lantern of summer in the middle of a winter greenhouse, that was different. Outside these glass walls, snow was falling on the fjord town, covering the roofs, the boats, the bakery, the path she had walked up. Somewhere above, the wind traced slow shapes through the clouds. Somewhere below, hot spring water murmured through the pipes. And in this quiet corner, a banana tree had quietly decided to thrive. Liv stared at it, rooted to the spot. It felt for a moment as if someone had smuggled a piece of a different world into this one, a strip of tropical coastline folded carefully into a parcel, then tucked secretly into the corner of her own town. Like someone planted a little patch of summer inside winter and only opens the door to show it once in a while, if you know to ask. Behind her, Knut chuckled very softly, as if he'd heard her thoughts. "Not what you expected to see today, I imagine," he said. Liv shook her head slowly, eyes never leaving the fruit. "I don't think I ever imagined seeing this here at all," she whispered. "Bananas in our town while it's snowing outside. It doesn't feel real." Knut came to stand beside her, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn trousers. He looked up at the bunch with the calm affection of someone greeting an old friend. "It took me a long time to believe it myself," he admitted. "The first time I saw one of these trees was in a book about faraway places. Palm trees, bright markets, people in light clothing. The kind of images that feel like dreams when you live among snowdrifts." He paused, his gaze drifting briefly somewhere far beyond the greenhouse ceiling. "Many years later, a sailor from another town brought me a tiny plant in a pot. He'd been traveling for work and thought it would make me laugh. It was barely more than a few leaves and a promise." Knut smiled at the memory. "I don't know if he truly expected it to survive," he said. "I'm not sure I did either. But I gave it a corner. I gave it warmth from the springs, and I waited." His voice softened, took on the slow cadence of someone remembering a long, patient story. Year after year, it grew a little taller. Some winters were harder on it than others. Sometimes the leaves burned a little at the edges from the dry air. Sometimes I worried the light wasn't enough. He shook his head, still faintly amused at his own worry. But it kept going, he said, quietly. It didn't rush. It just added a little more green every season, stretching toward the roof. He nodded toward the fruit hanging in front of them. The first time it gave me a bunch of bananas, I almost didn't dare touch them, I murmured. I thought if I did, the spell would break, and I'd wake up to find I'd only been dreaming. Liv smiled, a soft warmth blooming in her chest. "What did you do?" she asked. "I waited until they smelled right," he replied. "Until they weren't just yellow, but sweet too. Then I picked them one by one, very carefully, and shared them with the oldest neighbors in town." He turned to her with a glint of quiet humor. "I figured if anyone deserved to taste something that unlikely in the middle of winter, it was them." Liv's gaze returned to the fruit, their smooth skins, their patient curve. She imagined biting into one, the way the flesh would give under her teeth, the taste of sun and sugar and something wild, right here, where the world outside was all shades of white and gray. It made her feel impossibly hopeful, like there were more strange, gentle possibilities in the world than she'd remembered, like the rules she'd quietly accepted about what could and couldn't exist might not be as strict as she'd thought. She stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, letting the sight of the banana tree sink into her bones, like a story she knew she'd remember for the rest of her life. Eventually, the path between the beds led them to a small open corner of the greenhouse, a kind of resting place among the rows. In that corner stood a simple wooden table and two mismatched chairs, one with a slightly crooked back, the other with a faded cushion tied to its seat. On the table was a plain teapot, a pair of sturdy mugs, and a tin with a dented lid that once might have held biscuits from a shop, but now clearly held homemade ones instead. "Every garden needs a place to sit," Knut said gently. "Otherwise you forget to look at what you've grown." He nodded toward the chairs in a quiet invitation. Liv eased herself down onto the cushioned one, the fabric pleasantly warm from the greenhouse air. As she sat, she noticed the view from this little corner. The glass nearby was fogged with condensation, droplets gathering at the top and then gliding slowly downward in thin, clear trails. Beyond the misted panes, the shapes of trees and snowdrifts were barely visible, shadowy and distant, like memories of a different season. Inside, everything looked softer, edges blurred by a gentle haze, colors warmed by the filtered light. Knut poured tea from the pot. The liquid was a dark, gentle brown, wisps of steam curling up with the familiar scent of herbs and something faintly citrusy. He pushed one mug toward her. "It's nothing fancy," he said. "Just a few leaves and a bit of dried peel. But it tastes better when the air is warm." Liv wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat seeped slowly into her fingers, then into her wrists, then deeper still. For a while they sat without speaking, just listening to the tiny sounds of the greenhouse, the soft turning of the fans, the distant drip of water, the faintest rustle whenever a leaf shifted against another. The quiet wasn't empty. It felt full, like soil that had been carefully tilled and was now simply waiting. After a few sips, Knut set his mug down and leaned back slightly, eyes drifting toward the tall banana tree in the corner. "You know," he began slowly, "that tree taught me more about patience than anything else in this place." Liv glanced at him, then followed his gaze. "How long did it take?" she asked, "from the little plant your friend brought to the first bananas?" Knut let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. "Years," he said. "More than I expected, fewer than I deserved." He rested his elbows loosely on his knees, fingers interlaced. "At first I checked it all the time," he admitted. "Every morning, first thing, I'd come in here and look for some sign it was ready to reward me. A flower, a bud, anything at all." He shook his head at the memory of his own impatience. "But plants don't work like that. Or they do, but not on our schedule. They grow the way they have to grow, in their own rhythm." He paused, letting the idea settle in the air. "You can't pull a leaf to make it longer," he continued softly. "And you can't dig up the roots every day to see if they've spread. If you keep disturbing them, they never get the chance to do what they're meant to do." Liv listened, her hands still around the warm mug. "It's tempting, though," she murmured, "to check, to ask all the time, is it ready yet? Is it happening yet?" Knut nodded slowly. "Oh, it is," he said, "very tempting, especially when the thing you're waiting for is something you've never seen before, something you're not even sure is possible." He glanced at her, his gaze kind but steady. "So I made myself a rule," he went on. "I would care for it every day, water it, feed the soil, make sure the warmth was right. But I would stop demanding answers. I told myself, your job is the care. The tree's job is the growing. Let it do its part in peace. He fell quiet for a moment, letting the hush of the greenhouse fill the space between them again. When the first flower finally appeared, he said, after a while, it did it in the middle of an ordinary morning. No fanfare, no music. I almost missed it because I wasn't staring at it anymore. His smile was small and fond. I think that's how many good things arrive, he added softly, when we've stopped trying to drag them toward us and are just there, keeping the soil warm. Liv's eyes dropped to the surface of her tea, the steam rising in soft curls, the faint reflection of leaves moving above them. She felt his words sink in like water into dry ground. Since coming back to the town, she had been waiting too, waiting for a clear sign of what her life was supposed to be now, waiting for someone or something to tell her whether she should stay or go, change course or settle down. She'd poked at the question just the way someone might poke at a fragile root, pulling at it again and again to see if it had grown. Maybe that was why she felt so tired sometimes, even on quiet days. What if I don't know what I'm growing yet? She asked quietly, almost surprised to hear her own voice say it out loud. What if I don't even know what kind of tree I am, or what kind of fruit I'm meant to make? Knut didn't answer right away. He didn't hurry to fill the silence. Instead, he let it sit between them, gentle and unthreatening, like a small, empty pot waiting for a seed. Finally, he spoke. Then maybe, he said slowly, it's not time to worry about the fruit yet. He turned his mug in his hands, looking at the way the light caught the glazed surface. Maybe right now it's enough to make sure you're warm enough and watered enough, and that you're planted in soil that doesn't feel like you're holding your breath all the time. He looked up, his eyes kind. That's all this banana tree had to begin with. Warmth from the springs, good earth, and time. It didn't know it was going to grow bananas. It just did the next bit of growing it could do. He gestured vaguely toward the rows of vegetables. None of these plants sit here asking themselves what they want to be in 10 years. They just live the day they're in, reach for the light that's there, and trust that something in them knows how to become what they're meant to be. Liv let those words move through her at their own pace. She thought of the hot spring water traveling from the pools to the pipes, of the way warmth could shift shape and purpose without losing itself. She thought of the bakery, the small, steady comfort of kneading dough, of filling the shop with the smell of fresh bread, of her grandmother's cottage and the quiet, familiar rhythm of this town. Maybe she thought she didn't need to decide everything right now. Maybe it was enough for this season to let herself be somewhere that felt like good soil, to rest her roots in warmth and gentleness, and trust that the answers would show themselves when it was time. Maybe I don't need a plan, she said softly, almost to her tea. Maybe I just need a temperature I can grow in. Knut's smile deepened very slightly. That sounds like a good start to me, he said. Beyond the glass, a gust of wind brushed past the greenhouse, the snow outside shifting in subtle, silent waves. Inside, the air stayed warm. Water dripped. Leaves swayed the tiniest amount in the moving air. And around the two of them, seated at a small wooden table with their mugs of simple tea, the quiet, living patience of the greenhouse went on working, slowly, steadily, turning heat and time into green. By the time they had finished their tea, the light inside the greenhouse had shifted, growing a little softer, a little more golden as the day moved quietly toward noon. Liv stood once more, reluctant to disturb the peaceful stillness around them, but she knew she couldn't stay forever. Outside, the town would be going about its day, and her mother would soon be ladling soup and slicing bread for the lunch crowd. Knut rose too, collecting the mugs and setting them gently aside. Then he glanced toward the corner where the banana tree stood, its leaves still reaching calmly toward the roof. "Before you go," he said, with a small conspiratorial smile, "there's one more thing." He walked over to the tree, feet moving with the easy familiarity of someone who had taken this path thousands of times. Liv followed slowly, her eyes drawn again to the cluster of fruit hanging from the central stalk.
Up close, the bananas looked even more beautiful. The ones nearest the top were still pale, with just a hint of green clinging to their skins. But near the end of the bunch, one in particular seemed to glow with a deeper, more confident color. It was a soft, warm yellow, with tiny brown freckles scattered across its surface, the kind of pattern that only appears when a banana has taken its time to ripen. Knut reached up with both hands, moving carefully, almost ceremonially. He cupped the ripest banana in his palm, gave it a slow, gentle twist, and it separated from the cluster with a quiet snap. For a moment, he simply held it there, weighing it lightly in his hand. Then he turned and offered it to Liv. "This one," he said softly, "is the first to ripen this year, the very first piece of summer from this tree." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "I'd like you to have it, so you can taste the difference between this and the ones that travel for weeks and ripen under lamps in some warehouse. He nodded once, firmly. Let it show you what patience tastes like. Liv looked down at the banana resting in his work-roughened palm. Something in her chest tightened, not with sadness exactly, but with that particular kind of tenderness that arrives when someone offers you a gift you hadn't expected, but secretly needed. She received it as though it were made of glass, holding it in both hands, feeling its gentle weight, its surprising warmth from the greenhouse air. "Thank you," she said quietly. I don't really have words for how special this feels." Knut waved a hand as if to brush away the need for big speeches. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "Don't eat it in a hurry on the walk home or standing in the kitchen while you're doing 3 other things." He tilted his head, considering. "Take it somewhere quiet," he went on, "when you can really taste it. That's the only way to tell the difference." A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "I can do that," Liv replied. "I'll wait until tonight in my attic room when the house is quiet and the snow has settled." She pictured it as she spoke, the little pool of lamplight on a blanket, the sound of the wind against the roof, and the first bite of something that had ripened under glass while winter pressed at the walls. Knut seemed satisfied by this answer. "Good," he said. "Then we'll let the banana finish its journey there." He walked her back toward the door, pausing here and there to adjust a pot, touch a leaf, or nudge a small stone back into place along the edge of a bed. The tiny corrections of someone who loved this place exactly as it was, but still liked to make sure everything was comfortable. At the threshold, Liv paused, the banana cradled carefully in one hand, her other hand resting on the door handle. She took a last slow look around. The rows of plants, the hanging herbs, the faintly turning fans, the banana tree watching over it all from the corner. The air was warm and wet and full of life, the kind of air that made you want to breathe a little more deeply and linger a little longer. "Thank you for showing me this," she said softly. "It feels like I've been somewhere outside of time for a while." Knut smiled, the gentle, knowing kind of smile that doesn't need many words. "You're welcome here any time," he replied. "Winter is long, and the plants like company." With that, she pulled the door open. The cold met her instantly, a sharp, clean rush of air that slipped around her ankles and up her sleeves, reminding her just how sheltered she had been. As she stepped outside, the chill touched her cheeks and the inside of her nose, her breath turning to mist in front of her in a quick, surprised puff. Behind her, the door eased itself closed with a soft thump. She turned back to look. From the outside now, the greenhouse appeared once more as a low, snow-covered shape in the hillside, its glass roof mostly hidden beneath the white. But along the panes, that same thin veil of condensation had formed, a pale mist clinging to the inner surface.
It made the whole structure glow faintly from within, not brightly, but steadily, like a lantern wrapped in tissue paper or a small lamp someone had placed under a blanket. To Liv, it looked like a promise, a warm, quiet promise sitting there in the snow. She tucked the banana carefully into her bag, nestling it between a folded scarf and the pages of her notebook so it wouldn't bruise. Just knowing it was there made her feel oddly protected. Not because it was valuable in any ordinary way, but because it carried a story with it now. The story of hot springs and hidden pipes, of leaves reaching for light in the middle of winter, of a tree that had taken years to offer up this one simple piece of fruit. As she started down the path, the world outside felt colder than before, but she was carrying a strip of summer with her. With each step she took, the snow crunching gently under her boots, she imagined a banana resting quietly in her bag, keeping it secret, waiting for nightfall. It didn't feel like just something to eat anymore. It felt like a tiny, golden charm, a reminder that even in the deepest winter, something warm and sweet was still quietly ripening somewhere out of sight in its own time. And she thought as she walked back toward the town, I'm taking more than a fruit with me. I'm taking a little piece of that patience and a little piece of that warmth. The snowflakes landed softly on her coat and hair, but inside, where the banana story had already settled, there was a steady, gentle glow.
That night, the town lay under a sky the color of soft wool. The snow had continued all afternoon, filling in footprints and smoothing over paths until everything outside looked like a single, unbroken sheet of white. In the attic bedroom, though, it was warm. Liv's little lamp on the bedside table cast a pool of honey-colored light across the sloping ceiling, across the quilt pulled up over her legs, across the small collection of things she'd placed carefully beside her for the evening. Her journal, a book she'd been reading, now closed with its ribbon marking her page, and the banana from the greenhouse, resting there like a small crescent moon. Outside the window, the world was dim and soft. Snow clung in a gentle, uneven layer to the glass, blurring the shapes beyond it. But there were still hints of the town visible in the distance. A few yellow windows glowed here and there, scattered across the dark like tiny islands of warmth. Further up the hillside, near where the hot springs lay hidden, a faint veil of steam rose into the night, almost invisible against the clouds, but there, if you knew to look. Liv sat propped up against the pillows, wrapped in her blanket, listening to the muffled hush of the wind against the roof. The usual worries that sometimes tried to visit her at night felt quieter now, as if the greenhouse had taken some of them and gently composted them into something softer. Her gaze fell to the banana again. It looked perfectly at home in the lamplight, its skin gone a little deeper in color since the morning, freckles more pronounced, as though it had been finishing its ripening just for this moment. She picked it up with both hands, feeling the slight give of the peel under her fingers. The warmth of the room settled into it. For a moment she simply held it there, letting the anticipation expand in her chest. Then, slowly, without rushing, she began to peel it. The skin parted with a soft, familiar sound, opening in gentle strips that curled back on themselves. The inside was a pale, creamy yellow, smooth and unblemished, releasing a scent that was subtly different from the one she knew from the city. Sweeter somehow, fuller, less like something that had waited under lights in a warehouse, more like something that had hung in warm, living air until it was ready. She brought it to her lips and took a small, careful bite. The flesh yielded instantly, soft but not mushy, and the taste spread across her tongue in a slow, unfolding wave. It was sweet, richly sweet, but not sharp or artificial. There was a depth to it, a roundness, like sunlight that had been gathered over many days and distilled into this one mouthful. She closed her eyes without thinking. For a few seconds, the world around her seemed to rearrange itself. The snow outside, the wind, the long dark winter, all of it faded to the edges of her awareness, and in their place she felt warmth. Not the heat of summer air on bare skin exactly, but the memory of it, soft and golden, filtered through leaves. It was such a simple thing, just a piece of fruit. And yet, in that moment, it felt like she was tasting all the choices and chances that had made it possible. The sailor bringing the tiny plant, Knut tending it year after year, Olea's hot springs sending their warmth through the pipes, the greenhouse holding its little pocket of damp air steady against the snow. All of that in one quiet bite. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and took another small piece, stretching the experience into as many moments as she could. When she was nearly finished, she set the last small portion down on the plate beside her, not because she was full, but because she wanted to write while the taste was still bright on her tongue. She reached for her journal and opened it to a fresh page. The paper glowed softly in the lamplight. For a moment her pen hovered. Then the words began to appear, neat and steady. Tonight I ate a piece of summer in the middle of winter, she wrote. The pen moved on, guided by the same quiet rhythm that had filled the greenhouse. I'm still not sure what my life will look like or where I'll end up, but maybe that's all right. Maybe, for now, it's enough to find the places that feel like warm soil and stay there long enough for roots to grow. She paused, listening to the wind sigh once against the attic window, then added, "Maybe I don't need to know what kind of tree I am yet. Maybe my job is just to keep my own greenhouse warm, to tend the little corner of my heart where hope feels safe to grow." Her pen slowed, but there was one more thought waiting. "Someday," she wrote, "I'd like to have my own banana tree. Something in my life that took years to grow and finally surprises me with its sweetness, even if it's only inside, in a place no one else can see." She set the pen down and reread the lines, not to check for mistakes, but simply to let them sink in more deeply. The last bite of banana waited patiently on the plate. She picked it up and finished it, letting the flavor linger as long as possible, a tiny, bright echo of summer in the middle of a snowy night. Then she closed her journal, turned off the lamp, and slipped down under the covers. In the darkness, the room felt even quieter. The faint glow from the window was enough to outline the familiar shapes of the attic, her bookshelf, the chair by the corner, the slope of the ceiling overhead. Outside, winter continued. Snow fell in slow, silent sheets over the roofs, over the bakery, over the hillside and the hot springs, and over the little greenhouse with its glowing glass roof. Somewhere under that roof, the banana tree stood in the dim light, leaves rustling softly whenever the fan stirred the air, still drawing warmth from the springs below, still doing the slow, invisible work of growing. And here, in her bed, Liv felt something similar happening inside her. A sense of quiet, of being gently, steadily warmed from within, as if the hot spring water running under the greenhouse had found a way to reach her heart as well. Outside, it was a long winter, but she knew now that hidden in its depths were small, unexpected pockets of summer, easily missed, but unmistakably real once you stepped into them. Someone, somewhere, was keeping those pockets alive, tending them with patient hands, making sure that when the time was right, sweetness would be waiting. As her breathing slowed and the last of her thoughts faded into drowsy, drifting shapes, Liv held on to one final gentle idea: that she too could learn to do this for herself, to keep a little space warm even when everything outside felt cold, to let things grow at their own pace, to trust that One day, when she least expected it, her own quiet summer might be hanging there, ripe and ready, waiting for her to take the first bite. With that thought resting softly in her mind, she let go and drifted into sleep.